About the arsenal of democracy, the need for the arsenal of democracy 2.0. It's not going to be World War II. We're not going to win the war against China with more ships, more planes, and more tanks. We need to converge the hardware, the software, the AI, and the autonomy. And I think the panel we've assembled is going to touch on that in a positive way. I believe our country is still not on a wartime footing, and our adversaries are. You look at what's going on in China. You look at the fact that one shipyard in China has more capability than all the shipyards that we have here in the U.S. A recent study said that they can acquire advanced weapon systems 6 times faster than we can. Recently, Russia doubled their defense budget. I think I read that they now are producing 3,000 drones a day. They've set a target for 3 million drones in calendar 2025. So clearly adversaries are on a wartime footing. We aren't yet. And let's get started with the disruption panel. Jim decided to call it the Disruptors. It's not the new entrants. It's not the non-traditionals. It's the Disruptors. Some of these companies have been around since 1963, 1994, 2015, all over. Everybody can be a disruptor, and that's the theme for today's conference. So with that, we have Eric DeMarco from Kratos, Chris Brose from Anduril, Mike Gallagher from Palantir, Fatih Ozmen from Sierra Nevada, Ryan Tseng from Shield AI. So why don't we get started? Mike, since you're kind of sort of in the middle. As you know, Mike was a congressman before he decided to join the Defense Industrial Base, and you chaired the committee on China in Congress. So you talked a lot about the new Cold War with China. How are we doing technologically? Where are our gaps? Where are our opportunities?
Great. Well, it's an honor to be with you. I think we definitely disrupted how one enters the stage and sits down. I was supposed to sit there. It's all good, but we're going to have a great conversation. It's fun to be with a bunch of friends on this panel and people that I collaborated with when I was in Congress and out, and so really looking forward to the discussion. First of all, when I and others started using the phrase New Cold War, there was a lot of pushback, and traditionally the pushback you get is, well, China's not the Soviet Union, these are fundamentally different competitions, a point which I take well, but I think what is useful about the phrase is that it reminds us that this is a whole of society competition. It's not just a military competition, it's also an economic competition, it's also an ideological competition, and in many ways it's more complex and dangerous than the old Cold War because we never had to contemplate a form of selective economic decoupling from the Soviet Union because our economies didn't really interact. So here, as we look at China, what we're seeing is the biggest buildup of conventional and strategic military power since at least World War II, probably longer. The conventional balance of power in the region, in the Indo-Pacific, continues to erode and go in the wrong direction. Despite all the happy talk that my committee and everyone else in Congress has had, we still have not surged weapons and things that can kill and sink Chinese communist ships west of the international date line, which is profoundly concerning. Put differently, we all now seem to recognize China as the pacing challenge, to use the jargon of the day, and yet we haven't conducted ourselves with the requisite sense of urgency that one would if we truly believed that the probability of World War III was increasing. Point 2, usually on the economic domain of this competition, people say, well, I get it, Gallagher, you've been screaming about China invading Taiwan, and we all know that Xi said his military needs to be ready by 2027, but his economy's in shambles. It would be stupid for him to invade Taiwan. Well, I would submit you probably have the causality backward if you subscribe. First of all, that's a dangerous form of mirror imaging. Second of all, it could be just as plausible, if not more plausible, that Xi Jinping's economy sucks because he's preparing his country to go to war with the West. And this, to answer your question directly, is what concerns me the most, right? I think because of the efforts of people on this panel and others and the new administration, I have optimism that we will make some interesting changes militarily and start to arrest the eroding balance of conventional military power. Where I still have profound concerns is in the economic domain, because the minute we find ourselves in a kinetic military confrontation with China over Taiwan, they'll start to weaponize key supply chains, right? Think about what they did in the early stages of the pandemic and threatened to cut off access to life-saving drugs and plunge us into a sea of coronavirus. Americans start to lose access to life-saving drugs, everybody freaks out. Think about all the revelations around Salt Typhoon, Volt Typhoon. Even if they have the ability to get us to question the safety of water that comes out of our taps, right? And our water utilities are open targets for the Chinese in the cyber domain. They can unleash chaos. So the final thing I'd say is we just have to operate as if this is a right here at home problem. It is not a distant over there problem. So other than that, I'm an optimist, Chris, and I think we're winning. Yeah.
Great answer.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to switch to Fatih and talk about modular open system architecture. You've been around a long time. This is a topic that's been around for decades. Are we making any progress here or not? And what are your thoughts on MOSA in the future?
Thanks again for
I think your mic.
I think you got to turn your mic on in the it's like a thing in your pocket, yeah. Or yell. Oh, it's on. No, you're right.
Nah, move it up a little.
How about now?
A little bit. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
I think I need to get it closer here.
If you wore a tie, it'd be easier to.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't bring my shorts, so I'm behaving myself. No, well, thank you again. It's really a privilege to be here. Wonderful friends here, and we are not only disruptors, but we're also collaborators. I mean, each one of us. I know Sierra Nevada works with almost everybody here at the Prime South, different relationships. So, but MOSA, modular open systems architecture, is a big question, and this also goes back to the source of this disruption thing. You know, what is a disruptor? What does it mean to be a disruptor, right? To me, there's becoming a disruptor and being a disruptor. So I think what made SNC successful over the years and a disruptor is to become one, you have to work with users shoulder to shoulder and really understand their needs, their requirements, and bring them technological solutions. And like one example I can give you that ties to MOSA question is our ability to disrupt the conventional system on a program called SEAC, where we essentially wanted, we were unbeatable because we wanted to share the data rights, provide the data rights to the government, and open the architecture on that platform, which has never been done before. It was always closed architecture, vendor lock. So we are not afraid of competition. I think open architecture definitely helps a lot. Now, to be a disruptor, you really have to have a proven track record. You have to deliver what you promise. So what Chris said, I've been around maybe too long now, but I was engineer number 3 at SNC years ago, and now company has grown to be one of the largest mid-tier privately held companies. So, and then there is a difference again between privately held and publicly held too, but we'll talk about that later. In terms of, I think what makes MOSA very important and critical for our future is to, when you look at the acquisition costs, we all talk about acquisition reform. And then the changes, about 1/3 of the upfront costs are the acquisition costs. 2/3 is the sustainment and O&M. If you have an open architecture and if you're willing to compete and share the data rights with the government and have a government reference architecture, then if you're good enough, you will be in the game. But you're not going to be locked into a particular vendor lifetime of a program, which could be sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars. So I think it's very important to have this competition, which helps industrial base, which I think is one of the biggest problems we have. That's why we need the disruptors. Like Mike, you said, the whole of nation approach that China has is an advantage. We have a disadvantage. We don't have whole of government. We don't have whole of industry. We have a top-heavy tier 1 structure. We have a lot of small businesses that don't have the scale to move the needle, so we are missing the middle layer. So what we need to do is work on that disruption together collectively to expand the industrial base, not just to protect it. And to do that, that open architecture is one of the answers to the question that allows the best of the best to come and win. Otherwise, you'll be in there for a long time. Even if you're not performing, government should be able to fire you if the company is not performing. and they bring somebody else, but they can only do that if they have access to the architecture and the data rights. Otherwise, they couldn't do it. So that's a long way of answering, but I think that's a very critical question. And every service is trying to do MOSA in different shapes or forms, right? And different levels. So you can go to the chip level, you can go to board level, you can go to systems level, you can go to mission level. But I think the key will be in the open architecture to stay close to the customer. Like we love customers like special ops because we like, they need the quick reaction. They need to be able to change the vendors very quickly. I can give you so many examples, but one of the ones that comes to my mind is we were flying this airplane and then government wanted to put sensor A, sensor B, sensor C. Every time it will be tons of money, change the vendors. So we came up with an open architecture concept where they can plug and play. And they get to pick the best vendor they need for that mission. So I think the mission focus and caring on the customer, it really drives you to that open architecture solution that you don't want to get them locked into coming to you because you want them to come to you, not because they have to come to you.
All right, thank you for that. Ryan, over to you. Let's talk about autonomy. I know Shield AI is focused on autonomy. Why do you think that's so critical to the future of warfare?
Well, number one, super glad to be here today. Is my mic working?
Yeah.
I'm glad you went before me. I got to, turn it on, make sure that it was properly positioned. I think it's a great question. Shield AI has been focused on building autonomy for the last decade, and I think the reason it's become, or one of the reasons that we feel it is so important, we think, has been illustrated by some of the recent conflicts, especially in the Ukraine. We can see the battlefield of the future is defined by 100 or 1,000 times more systems than the battlefields of the past. It used to be about a relatively small number of high-end assets, and our forces organized around deploying those assets to tremendous effect. As a high school wrestler, I learned that every move has a counter move, and our adversaries in China have been studying the way that we operate, looking for vulnerabilities, and they've developed capabilities to exploit them. And now, I think that the industry is pretty, and a lot of people in government are pretty convinced that the future is about intelligent, affordable mass. And as we have many more systems, right, that may imply that we need 100 times more pilots, 100 times more weaponeers, 100 times more operators. But that's a very difficult thing to pull off, right? It's very hard to find the brave men and women to sign up for the force who are willing to go out there and do the hard work, and I'm grateful for every single person that goes out there. But if we're going to put 100x the number of systems on the battlefield, the only way that problem closes is if we find a way to deploy autonomy at scale. And, there have been conflicts through history where we have brought mass to the table. You can look at World War I, you can look at World War II, you can look at Vietnam, tremendous amounts of mass brought to the battlefield, Russia, Ukraine. But those conflicts for protracted periods have ended up in stasis, where it's very hard for one side or the other to gain advantage. And that's where autonomy, the ability to make that mass intelligent, the ability to make that mass effective, we think becomes very important.
All right, thanks. Chris, recognizing the efforts we need to undertake and stay ahead of the pacing threat in China, how important are partnerships with other defense companies in your strategy to scale your business and to field technology and capability to the warfighter?
No, sorry, I appreciate it. Choking on water earlier, so let me apologize. My answer will not be as exciting or motivating as Mike Gallagher's, but it will be truthful as well. Partnerships for Anduril is kind of foundational to everything we do. From the very beginning of the company, our belief was if someone has already built some amazing piece of technology, some component subsystem or what have you, we don't want to go reinvent that wheel. One, because we're just focused on optimizing for speed. So from the get-go, the focus has always been on going there with partners. And I'd say I believe on one program or another, we're probably teamed with every company represented here on this stage. We were doing the math in the green room, and I think the Titan program alone pretty much gets us everybody. And I would say that is true across the board. We're teamed with traditional defense primes, teamed with large technology companies, small companies, new entrants, and everybody in between. Because again, the focus is on how you go quickly, and going quickly to us implies that you're going to have to go with companies that are bringing capability to the table. Again, whether that's software, hardware, mission systems, or the like. And this for us has never been like a religious issue. We're on contracts where we're happily working as a sub to a prime, providing rocket motors to primes that are selling weapons, providing mission systems to companies that are selling different types of platforms, providing software to companies that are providing hardware. And then the inverse is true, obviously, where Anduril is the prime, and we're working with a diverse array of companies on programs that we're helping to lead. So, I think this is just kind of true for defense industry. I think that it has never been the case that one company has shown up and said, we can just kind of pull this whole thing together if you give us the money and get out of the way. And that's certainly true for us as well. And I think for where we're going, I think more of these programs are just inherently going to provide and sort of require different types of teaming arrangements that are not the sort of traditional subprime, kind of traditional LSI model, where you're going to have a lot of companies that are going to have to collaborate in very different kinds of structures to provide capability to the warfighter on a timeline that matters. So, for us, again, partnerships has always been foundational to how we work. And it's never been sort of an ideological issue one way or the other about how we team up, as long as it makes sense and we're able to deliver something of value quickly.
All right, thanks. Eric, I think I'm going to give you a two-parter since you're all the way down there. Number one, following up on what Chris was talking about, when do you, as CEO of Kratos, go through the thought process as to when do you prime, when do you sub? And then I think the second part, there's been a lot of discussion about the increased need for fixed price development programs. Any thoughts you want to share on that subject as well?
We have several Kratosisms, and one of them, it's better to have a part of something than all of nothing. And so we look to partner. The opportunity of a higher probability of win is there. We'll go for a prime position if we think we can win it straight out, and also we can rationalize the investment. Being a public company, we do things in the light of day, so we have to balance expenditures and going after things versus dropping money to the bottom line. We probably partner on 30 or 40% of what we do. We're prime on 70% or so. Chris, what was the second piece?
Fixed price development contracts.
No, fixed price development contracts. Yeah, we, another Kratosism is leading edge technology, proven technology that's been developed, demonstrated, integrating that, putting that together into a hypersonic system or a drone system or a satellite system will do that, leading edge. Bleeding edge, something that's never been done before, those are the types of fixed price contracts that we tend to stay away from. Because if it's never been done before, we don't have the size or the scale like a Boeing to be able to absorb and get the thing done for an amount of money that's just crazy. We just can't do it. So we'll pick our spots. We like fixed price contracts because if we do it right, we do it ahead of schedule, we do it ahead of budget, we make more money. But fixed price development contracts, I can't think of one significant one in the entire company we're working on today.
All right, thank you. I think we'll go a little more rapid fire. I think this will be a question for Ryan, Mike, and Chris. And it's going to refer to Secretary Hegseth's recent memo directing the DoD to adopt software acquisition processes more closely aligned with the commercial model. So what benefits do you see from increasing commerciality for software, and what risks may persist?
Number one, I think it's brilliant. I mean, I think everybody here has commercial software that probably updates multiple times a day. You probably have no idea it's updating, but your stuff just works. And this is very complicated software doing all sorts of things. And so anything that accelerates the pace, not of development, but of software deployment, I think is absolutely strategic for the country. I'll give you an anecdote or a story of ours from taking our capabilities over to the Ukraine. The night environments are a big deal out there. We had our drone and we got a whole brief from the Ukrainians on what the situation was going to be. And basically they said, look, as soon as you go over 200 feet, right, there's going to be no GPS. But as long as you're taking off, you can use it for an initial fix. You're going to go up. You're going to start hitting Ukrainian, Russian jammers. Just don't count on it. So our team worked together, put together the capability. We sent it out to Ukraine, launched the airplane. Turned out we didn't have GPS at about 3 feet. And the airplane went up, and it just went the Russians were this way. The airplane went that way. We lost control of the vehicle, and it just took off. And I don't know if who here has seen the movie Interstellar? Have you seen the movie where he's in the cornfield and he's chasing the drone? So the drone goes for about 2 hours. Our guys, the Ukrainians, hop in a Sprinter van, and they're like looking out, trying to see if they can see it. They're on the laptop trying to regain signal. It was completely ridiculous. They found it about 80 kilometers away in its holding pen, which was in the complete wrong spot. They pulled over by a cornfield, actually, or sunflower field, actually. So it was a little bit different from the movie. And they landed the drone on the side of the highway. So they called back home and say, bad gouge, no GPS at any point. Like, this is not going to work. Our engineering team re-architected the stack, validated it in Texas in 24 hours, pushed it forward. The team replanned the op and went out with the capability. 24 hours later, there was a Wall Street Journal article ultimately written about the outcome of that technology demonstration, but the bottom line outcome was there was a fine fix and finish of a Russian SA-11 by Harmeyers with the coordinates provided by our aircraft. So the key insight there is that turning software within 24 hours is make or break for mission capability. And we have some programs where if we want to change the software, it could take us more than a year for the software change to cut in. And so I think Hegseth's memo is brilliant. I think the future will be increasingly defined by mass, and that mass's effectiveness is going to be defined by its intelligence, which is going to be defined by its software. And the ability to read and react on the battlefield and put these systems downrange effectively depends critically on whether or not we can update our systems the way that your mobile phone applications get updated. Now, what are the risks? Right? It's relatively low consequence if, like, my Uber app crashes or my Amazon app crashes. At least, for me, maybe tougher for some. I don't know. But these are pretty high consequence systems. And so, how do you manage the intersection of high assurance and high speed? And I think that's an area where we're going to have to work together.
Okay. Mike?
That was very well said. I'm not sure I can add much other than to say it has the added benefit, if the memo is accompanied by robust implementation guidelines and just implementation and realizes its full promise, it has the added benefit of bringing us all into compliance with extant longstanding law, right? We have commercial preferences embedded into the Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act that go ignored on a near daily basis, like so many other laws that we just ignore on a daily basis. And I think about this, my beloved Marine Corps is good at many things, like killing bad guys, foremost among them, doing pull-ups, second to that, but they're one and the same. But building software, probably not among the top 5 things the Marine Corps is good at, right? I quite like the vision that Mike Brown, the former head of DIU, laid out in testimony before Congress when he started talking about turning the Pentagon into a commercial fast follower. And I think now we have a moment in time to actually turn all that talk into actual action. So I salute Secretary Hegseth. And just think about, I think a lot of times this discussion gets clouded because if the government itself has a software hobby project, people will say, well, it's not that big, doesn't cost that much money, but then you add it up, and in the Army alone, it's like $10 billion, right? Across all the services, the number is probably astronomical, and that's even a low-end estimate right there. And then you think about all the other things we are paying money for various outside entities to study, for example, physical fitness trends, right? A service had done this recently, and it took an outside entity about 8 months to do a study of a certain physical fitness test. Once we found out that the underlying data was already instantiated into one of our products, we did that same analysis in 4 minutes. The possibilities for savings are enormously exciting, to say nothing of the savings in time, which is ultimately our most precious asset. So I remain very excited by Secretary Hegseth's memo, and I applaud him for doing it.
All right, Chris?
What's the old line? Everything that needs to be said has been said, but not everybody has said it. Look, I'm violent in agreement with everything that's been said here, particularly the part about enforcement, right? I mean, I think Hegseth's memo is exactly on point. But now the whole question becomes, ensuring the devils are in the details, right? So that when requirements get written, they're not written in such a way as to conveniently exclude, commercial software capabilities, which happens consistently, right? And I think, it's an old adage in, kind of new software-centric defense industry that the Department of Defense, quote unquote, doesn't know how to buy software, doesn't spend money on software. It turns out it actually spends an enormous amount of software just buying really bad software. And I think there are, some folks that are already out there ahead of the curve. And I'd call out the Army in particular, primarily because it's, on the brain, having been out at Fort Irwin there last week. Last year there was an Army memo that came out that basically said to the Army, thou shalt only buy software on cost-type contracts. So, it's all going to be, cost-plus contracts for software development, which is essentially telling, companies like ours and a whole slew of others who are spending collectively billions of dollars to build amazing software, you literally have no place here. Which, we can argue ideologically whether that's a good idea. It strikes me as like an insanely bad business practice. I think the good news is you look at the Army today and, out at Fort Irwin, they were literally integrating, different software capabilities, things from Anduril, things from Palantir. And this was done on the fly, exactly as Brendan said, coding overnight, bringing new features to the war fighters for the next day. And you literally had units putting on the shelf things that they had been deployed, and sent out to operate with, utilizing this prototype system and crushing the OPFOR. And it was incredibly exciting to see in action, how a different approach to command and control, focused on software, focused on commercial practices, completely in line with Secretary Hegseth's memo, is sort of literally changing the Army in front of our eyes. So there's an enormous amount of potential here, enormous excitement, and a lot of companies that are prepared to do this work if the Department of Defense will let them, and it's great to see them, being let.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be very exciting because you're not going to get cost and pricing data with software. You're going to have license agreements, and you're going to pay per unit per month, and the DoD's got to get their head wrapped around it. That's what we do in our businesses as consumers of software, and something as simple as Microsoft Desktop, we pay so much per month per employee. That's the way it works, and once they got you until you switch to a different system. So maybe kind of more of a hardware-ish type question for Fatih and Eric, and it's really dealing with production capacity. You guys build products, as do the other gentlemen, but where are we going to get all these people, and where are we going to get all the facilities to deal with the surge and the potential increase in the defense budget? Fatih?
Well, that's, I think we started out talking about China threat, and key will be scale and speed of our ability to produce weapons and systems. And so in that respect, I think it's very critical to be able to leverage the entire industrial base. And we talked about commercial solutions, we talk about software, we talk about how you turn around very fast. So they all, to me, it's all connected together. One example is we were talking about how quickly you turn the software around. You remind me of our Ukraine. There's a system, Frankensam, that we put together in a record time, like 7 months from blank sheet of paper to actual deployment in Kyiv, that we were not only turning, first of all, our philosophy is a little different. We are more of an integrator, although we have selected areas where we can go vertical, but more horizontal. And that pick the best of the breed for the mission. So we had a lot of commercial software in there. I'm kind of addressing the earlier comments. And then hardware side, the production side, we went to commercial houses. We bought Ford trucks. We bought whatever commercially available. We bought commercial software. So, and then what's more importantly is we were changing on the fly. Like you said, the mission didn't work. Ukrainians themselves, we opened the architecture. The data rights were shared, like I mentioned earlier. They were changing themselves. Next thing we see, they're firing Russian missiles to shoot down those Iranian drones. So I think scalability, if they said I need 100 more of those systems, the way that we did it, because we are not vertical integration is great, but it has its own limitations. So if you go to industrial base, you can leverage all the other production houses. You can leverage all the software houses. Then you can adjust the production scalability issue, because I was reading the other day, United States only able to produce about 100,000 drones a year, where Ukraine is now doing 2 million a year. Talk about production-based capabilities. So we need to, I'm very happy to see like Anduril and other companies are making big investments to have that capacity build up, but it's going to be tapping into multiple vendors. Otherwise, our country, like you said earlier, First World, Second World War, and we reached the automotive companies. We had everybody came to the help when there's a threat like this. So I think it's important to have that scalability factor into that production and the hardware capability and software capability, which is you have to tap in that dual-use commercial pieces. Although, in my case, we started with the government application. We spin off commercial applications, and some successful examples. We invested first and we left last, the battlefield, to do that, to bring that capacity into the pictures and also to care about the end user. So I think production is the biggest problem. We tried to address that earlier administration with replicator programs and a few other ones, but it's not enough. I think we need to do a nationwide approach and join our forces to be able to bring this solution to the table, which is going to depend on the architecture specs interfaces so that we can have multiple sources to be able to scale up and move very, very fast.
All right, Eric?
Chris, I appreciate you asking a hardware-related question, directly related to the workforce. Building mil-spec hardware that has to work correctly every time, and that's affordable so you can get it out there in quantity, is hard. It's very hard to do. And you need experts to do it. At Kratos, we have hypersonic glide vehicles flying. We have a family of small jet engines from $10,000 up to $40,000. We have jet drones. Everyone knows about Valkyrie. We've got Airwolf. We've got Thanatos. On class, they can pull 13 Gs unsustained. Building mil-spec hardware is hard, and the United States industrial base needs to be rebuilt to be able to do this quickly and affordably en masse so we can put the software in it. The number 1, 2, and 3 challenges at Kratos today are obtaining and retaining qualified people. And then when you put on top of that, they need to have a security clearance, especially in states where it's legal to smoke pot, and the kids, the younger generations, they have choices. And they can't have a security clearance if they're getting drug tested. It makes it all the more challenging. And right now, as you know, there's a generational recapitalization of strategic weapon systems occurring, and every one of us here, and all the traditional primes, et cetera, are taking part in it, and then there are the new space companies, so don't forget about them. We're all going after the same brilliant people. And it's very, very hard. And we're doing what I know everyone else is doing with apprenticeship programs and technical things at the factories, et cetera. Chris, there aren't enough people anymore. There just aren't enough. And now that circles all the way back into what the team here was talking about on AI and robotics. We're going to need that to fill in for the peoples that we don't have to build the mil-spec hardware to kick China's ass. Those are my thoughts.
Okay. Put a two-finger on that. We're not building hypersonic weapons or B-21s or GBSDs, so I'll state that right out. But we are building low-cost cruise missiles, weapons, robotic fighter jets, extra-large robotic submarines, so like real hardware. I think the approach that we've taken is you actually have to solve a lot of these manufacturing problems up front at the level of concept and design, or you're never going to be able to solve all of the problems that bedevil us downstream in terms of workforce, critical supply chains, critical minerals, all of the things that limit production and limit scalability. And I don't think this is like a new idea, right? I mean, if you go back to World War II and Liberty ships and Higgins boats and turning Willow Run into a B-24 production facility, We could do that because the systems that we were building were simple by design. They were mass producible. Like you could bring workforce, you could bring Rosie the Riveter in with minimal training to help produce defense capability. And I think that's actually the solve for this. It's to the greatest extent possible eliminating the need for critical supply chain, critical minerals, highly specialized workforce. You're always going to need some amount of those people. But to the greatest extent possible, if you can leverage commercial supply chains, if you can leverage, talented workforce, but people who are coming out of, the Home Depot or commercial automotive, who are putting together missiles more like you're snapping together IKEA furniture than mass-producing F-35s. I think that's actually how you solve the manufacturing problem and move us in the direction of the kind of scalable mass that Brendan was talking about. I don't see it closing any other way. So I completely agree with Eric's kind of analysis of the problem. I think we just have to make the problem different and go back to a lot of the old adages that we used to know when we had to solve these problems at scale, before we, kind of took the, 30-year kind of interesting approach of hegemony and, not having any kind of great power competition to think about.
Could I possibly three-finger on why I think that's such an important point? At the risk of this devolving into a mutual love fest here. Because and I'll put my former congressman hat on, when Congress tries to mitigate the downstream impacts of that and the workforce challenges, like what do we traditionally do, right? We throw money at workforce training programs, which have marginal utility or get filtered through a variety of bureaucracies, to include state and local bureaucracies that aren't always that efficient, or like advertising programs. And in my district, we were perennially having problems recruiting people to build warships in Marinette. It's really cold in Wisconsin too. Nobody's moving to Wisconsin for the weather. I mean, you get the best football team in the world, but like it's, that's only compelling for a certain subset of people. And even when you tried to like scale really exciting programs, like we would do an apprenticeship signing day for all the kids that decided not to go to a four-year college and study liberal arts, but instead learn a trade and immediately start working and earn a good living. There are limits to the scalability of a program like that, as well as just the demographic limits to the amount of people that are available, and a cultural limit, right? Because I would always encounter parents that would say, not every kid needs to go to a college. No, we've sent too many people to college. We've sent them to college. And I'd be like, okay, well, what about your kid? I'd be like, well, my kid's going to a four-year college, right? Because there was still a stigma associated with going directly into the trades, notwithstanding the economic rationality of going into the trades over going to college and accruing a lot of debt. So I just think all of those problems and challenges that we tried and failed to confront that I saw in Congress further emphasize the importance of getting at it upstream in the way that Chris mentioned.
Okay, very good discussion. I think we've all been around for decades. You go to different facilities. I can speak from my experience. A brand new facility built from scratch is by definition a heck of a lot more high-tech and efficient than taking an old facility, trying to move things around, doing your Kaizen events. So I think agreeing with these gentlemen, what Chris said, you got to start with a clean sheet of paper. And I think as there's a surge, there's more DPA money, companies get better visibility into the demand signal, we can all make those investments. I want to emphasize, because I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, it's clear we didn't actually prepare. We met 15 minutes beforehand. But we did agree that the challenges will take the entire industrial base. So we talk about the traditional primes, disruptors, public companies, private companies, venture cap, whatever. It's a big problem. We all have to work collaboratively. I just want to make it clear, even though the disruptors are on stage, everybody's part of the solution. So I thought I would have a little fun here and give everyone a chance to ask someone else on the panel a question. So, Fatih, you raise your hand. You didn't get to forefinger it. So ask anyone you want a question on the panel.
Actually, I have multiple questions, but I'm going to pick one because I look at the panel here. There's a mix of, it's always fascinated by public versus private ownership and their stakeholders, their expectations, ROI. So I wanted to ask, Eric is here, publicly owned entity, and he's at this level of kind of starting to go again, disrupting the system of the bigger public companies. Now, having said that, you have a couple of disruptors. One of them is here, Palantir and SpaceX, that started out. They became the largest market cap companies now between the two. They are the largest aerospace and defense in terms of valuation. So there's that one extreme, but still disrupt the system, and there's this smaller companies like yours, Eric. So I just the reason I want to ask the question, because being privately held, you know, there are two types of privately held too, by the way. You mentioned, Chris, that there is this venture or investor-funded entities and private companies, and there are founders or family-owned and funded companies. So since day one at Sierra Nevada, we always got little profits, invested back in business. It took a long time. It's a different model of private companies too. But my question to you is, going public, what are your experiences in being public compared to the private, plus and minuses of working with the shareholders? Well, you're trying to disrupt the system. You're trying to make those investments that you talked about, winning these programs. Those are kind of a long game kind of thing. So you can't go by quarter expectations, because you could be punished. So how do you walk that line? And what's your experience?
Yep. There are pros and cons with every choice in life. And there are pros and cons between being a publicly traded defense technology company, defense company, and being a private one. The clear pro is access to capital markets. There is no greater capital market scenario in the world than the United States of America. And if you perform, you do what you say, you basically have access to unlimited funding. Let me give you a very specific example related to that that's happening today. About a year ago, Kratos went and did a secondary offering, and we raised, I think, $333 million. Don't quote me on that. And we went to our shareholders, who I've known for a long, long time, Deanna and I, our CFO, and gave them a list of exactly what we were going to spend the money on. And I'll give three big ones. Three big ones was a partnership with GE Aerospace for a next-generation turbofan for cruise missiles, drones, and some other things. That's been announced now. The money's put to work that the shareholders gave us. A couple of weeks ago, we announced a partnership with Rafael here in the United States called Prometheus. It's a 50-50 partnership where we're going to be building tens of thousands of energetics for missiles, interceptors, including the Tamir and Iron Dome. There's another one. Check the box on the investors. And literally today, right now in Indiana, and this ties into the discussion we were just having, the governor is with my team, and we are announcing the standing up of a very large, brand new hypersonic manufacturing facility that will use all the state-of-the-art things that these guys were all talking about. And it will be the best in the country. So capital markets. The number one bad of being a public company is you do everything in the light of day. Everything you do is in the light of day. From me buying stock, people selling stock, it's in the light of day. Public shareholders expect you to make money. So Kratos' strategy is as you all know, we make significant investments up front to be first to market, to bring our hardware systems to market. And be first, that's our primary competitive advantage. Be first to market. All right? But we have to make money. We have to make a profit, and our shareholders expect us to grow 10 to 20% a year. So it's a hell of a balancing act when you're public to thread all those needles, satisfy the industrial base, your partners, the customer, and the shareholder, who's very important. I love them. They give us the money to do all that. That's how I see it.
Well, that's just one quick add-on question. How do you, Kratos have been great in terms of delivering their promises and investing in their own business, but there are a lot of public companies that are buying their shares back and issuing dividends.
Yep.
And that's still is that a disadvantage? Because there's a price you pay for access to capital markets. So
Right.
How do you manage that?
Right, and so the types of companies you're talking about, Fatih, their shareholders are called industrial investors. So industrial investors don't invest in high-growth companies. They invest in companies that are going to grow 0 to 3%, and they're going to buy back stock, and they're going to pay dividends. It's a very different type of investor base than a growth investor or a high-growth investor, which are technology investors that are invested in Kratos. These types of investors that are invested in Kratos, they expect us to put our money back into research and development that we do not put in our rates and bill the government. We eat it, but that means we can move as fast, we can be first to market, which drives our growth rate, which ties into their investment thesis. So it's two separate types of investor bases, and we have focused on growth investors versus, I'll say, traditional primes. They're on the industrial. There's no right or wrong here. It's a different business model, a different capital structure that the CEOs at these companies have to play.
Great answer. I mean, because our government always, DOD complains about larger companies, not invest tens of billions of dollars going back to shareholders as opposed to, but there's a different dynamic there, so that's above my pay grade, but thank you.
All right, thanks, Eric.
Yes, sir.
You can ask someone else a question.
It's like tag.
Oh, wow. I like
Yeah, I
this.
thought that was clear, right?
I like that.
I want to ask Chris a question.
Go for it.
Let's go.
There's, in the past year, 2 or 3, there is significant chatter, investment going in printed parts, 3D printed, additive manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. I have my own opinions on all this. I'd like to know your thoughts, truth and reality, especially when it comes to scaling.
Yeah. So, facts on the table, like Anduril uses all of the different cool whiz-bang advanced manufacturing technologies, 3D printing, automated this, automated that. And they work really well, particularly when you're building one-off things or you need to get a prototype quickly, you need a part replaced fast. I think the question is very different when you're then thinking about how do I build the 100th, the 1,000th, the 10,000th article. How you kind of set up production where you're trying to accelerate production and drive down cost, all the things of producing at scale. And I just think that we get overly liquored up on some particular technology that we think is going to solve all of our problems, and it turns out that that's just really not true. When you look at sort of Tesla's journey, they started out and said, we are going to build a completely humanless production facility. Everything is going to be automated. And then they realized real fast that there are just a lot of things that human beings do better, faster, and cheaper than amazing robots. And I think that's true, for us in particular, where it's going to inevitably be a blending of, kind of new technologies, old practices, automated approaches, kind of human-centric, more manual approaches. And the whole goal here is how you optimize it to, increase outcome, increase production, lower price. So again, I just, I get a bit weary of, kind of this sense that there's some amazing technology that's going to solve all of our production problems magically. When in reality, I think it's more what I was saying earlier, which is you have to actually solve these problems at the outset at the level of design, and then structure production with a combination of technology and sort of more traditional approaches, manned, unmanned, whatever you want to call it, that really kind of gets you to that answer. But it's an optimization of new and old. At least that's been our approach.
Great.
All right, you want to ask someone a question?
I'm going to ask you a question because I think you need to be part of this conversation.
That's what I was going to do.
Sorry, man.
What a disruptor you
So
are.
much for outsourcing
Rank order has its
moderation.
privileges.
Yeah.
All right.
So you have a really interesting perspective on this whole conversation. I mean, you're doing an enormous amount that is highly disruptive. You're teamed with a lot of companies. You also have a lot of heritage and a lot of work that you're producing at scale. I'm curious what you think defense industry is just missing the boat on. And I'm intentionally not caveating what I mean by defense industry, be it old, be it new, be it traditional, non-traditional, however you want to say it. And I'm also not specifying, missing the boat on what. I mean, it could be technology, it could be politics, it could be the threat. So very open-ended, just very curious, what do you think defense industry is just out to lunch on?
Wow, okay. I hadn't expected something to come boomeranging back, but
Sorry, we're trying to
no,
keep it
great question. You know,
energetic.
well, first of all, what I love about the panel and these companies is what I've been personally and our company talking about is the need to disrupt the whole ecosystem. Like I said at the beginning, it's too slow, too expensive, too bureaucratic, and we're not willing to take risks. So it starts with Congress, right, and the budget process. So I'll say what everybody says. It's ridiculous that we can't get a budget by the beginning of the year, right? I'm a public company. This would be the equivalent of me telling my shareholders in July of 25 what I think I'm going to make in 25. And they'll say, well, the year's half over. That's kind of the environment that we live in. So it's the same old thing for 20 years. Get the damn budget, predictability, demand signal, right? The Pentagon, again, I have been a strong believer. Our company does it, every company. You put in these processes, you put in these rules and regulations to mitigate risk. And the day you do it, it makes perfect damn sense and everybody agrees. You wake up 5, 10, 20 years later, the cumulative effect of all these risk mitigation processes have created more risk. So DOGE is an example. We like to say we doged ourselves last year. Eliminate the policies, relook at these things, streamline them. There's way too many steps in process and oversight that could be accelerated. And then for the defense industrial base, I think what we all talked about and what I think is great about this industry, I think there's probably 20% of our workforce, you know, are vets, which is great because you get the connectivity to the mission, but it's really just trying to break the mindset to think more and more creatively. I think some of these companies, old or new, it's almost this fear of challenging the status quo. We talk about it every day. How do we go faster? How do you think differently, right? Why am I sitting around waiting for an RFP? I mean, you know, let's just throw an unsolicited RFP at somebody. Probably like wouldn't know what to do with it, but try to act more and more commercial. So, you know, the fact that I think everybody's talking about disruption, you can't pick up the paper without someone saying the word, I think it's time to change. So, you know, a sense of urgency, let's take a little risk, and, you know, I think we're all going to be better off as a result of it. So,
Great answer.
Mike?
I think I've screwed up the natural order of the.
I don't know if there was, well, that's true.
Apologies.
So that brings me back to the question. But go ahead, Mike, why don't you ask one of these two gentlemen a question?
Well, that was my question. I was going to ask you about your Doge letter, Chris. So,
All right, well then,
well, besides like asking everybody who their favorite and best-looking member of Congress was the last 10 years.
Mike, you.
Yeah, what's that? Thank you.
You.
Thank you. I was not fishing for that.
Yeah.
Well, I had maybe this like a question that was originally intended for this Chris, because in an alternative universe, Chris and I almost worked on a Goldwater Nichols reform commission. Just quickly, I'd be curious, like, if there's something you believe in from that effort, like that, if you could wave a magic wand in the Goldwater Nichols reform space, what it would be, and maybe just a similar question to you about, you know, if you were king for a day or Doge master for a day, you could change one thing about DoD. Like you get the disruption, you get to like your disruption wish on one thing. What is that one thing? I don't know. You start, or you start.
Are you asking me or are you asking Chris?
Asking you.
I
was asking this Chris.
Look, I think massive resourcing against, you know, the critical capability gaps that have been identified. I think that there are people across the defense sector, you know, across policy that all see these sort of like glaringly obvious things that we should go do. And some of them, I think, with, you know, changes in policy can be addressed, but some of them need no kidding resourcing. And I think finding a way to get the resourcing behind the no kidding critical priorities would be one of the most transformational things that could be done for the department. There was Operation Warp Speed when COVID was a thing, which, you know, frankly, nobody likes to take their mind back there and what was going on, but just some incredible work when there was focused effort with the proper resourcing and the policy support to make it happen. And so then you sort of look across the federal government and ask yourself the question, why couldn't, you know, something like that be accomplished in the defense sector?
Yeah.
Can I answer that? Just add to that. I think Goldwater Nichols was the right idea at the time, but jointness was put onto the building. centralize jointness. I would think that one big thing could be to decentralize COCOMs. We talked about acquisition reform. We are not talking about requirements reform. I think that's where a lot of the problems lie. So how do we get the requirements the right way so that we don't go, build all these things? And because I heard from, so I recommend empowering COCOMs, giving them more say on the requirements and the budget, both. So because I heard a lot of complaints from individual COCOMs that services are not reacting to their requirements, and they're on their, we all know about decentralized. I like to decentralize. I like to trust my people, delegate, but some people like to have the control. So I think we have too much centralized jointness, back to that Goldwater-Nichols Act, that needs to be, could be reformed.
I agree with that, by the way.
All right, well, I think we ought to follow up on that one, because I think that's a great topic on COCOMs, and should they have acquisition authority, and then how we reconcile that, with interoperability, MOSA and such. So maybe we can just kind of go right down the line, Ryan, if that's all right. What are your thoughts about, COCOMs having the ability to buy something?
Number one, I'm not, an expert in this area, and so Shield AI is about 1,000 people. So, take this, from that perspective. There's a much bigger institution, the Defense Department. But look, when I want the best possible choices to be made, I try to push the resources and accountability as close to the problem as possible. I just think philosophically, for me, when you can get, accountability and resourcing aligned, it makes a big difference. It's a pretty, basic idea. And so, if the COCOMs had the ability and the resourcing, to be agile, I feel like that would be it makes a lot of sense to me. Again, take it with a grain of salt. What do I know?
Well, I'm not less smarter than you are, but I've been around a little longer, so my answer would be that I think services still need to what they do best: organize, train, and equip. So, but what needs to happen is the COCOMs drive the requirements and drive some of the allocation of the budgets. Maybe they don't directly acquire, but they have a lot more say than they have today. But I think the services and the DoD, the OSD, I should say, should set the standards and interfaces and the architecture, high-level things, because we need to do all domain solutions. We can't go by domain. This Golden Dome is a perfect example right now. We are just realizing we have a need, and we also realize how big of a problem it is to solve, because we never, you heard General Goodline earlier today talking about, I need to connect. I need to be able to talk to the Navy captain. I need to be able to do this as a Space Force. So I think that if we provide that high-level architecture and then allow the COCOMs to plug and play, you could easily do things. We all drive cars. We don't need to get trained. You go to different cars, but there are certain standards established by default. But the DoD can do a very high-level architecture and interface, maybe ICD level things, and they let the COCOM drive the train they want to do, because Indo-PACOM may want to do a different kind of all-domain thing and different threats than the CENTCOM, where you're chasing Houthi rebels and you don't need this particular exquisite capabilities, but they need to be able to play in the same architecture and have this all-domain solutions available to all the players. Right now, it's more isolated. And back to the congressional comment, I think the PE line items are not helping that, because we are managing line item by line item, rice balls, jobs in districts, not to pick on your earlier life, Mike, but those are the drivers, and so we really need some reforms. I don't think, because I've been seeing these acquisition reform, administration after administration, this one leaves, you're back to square. So there's a chance right now, everybody recognizes that the disruption needed, industrial base is in trouble, we have a new threat environment, China, Russia joining forces together, so we really have to do things differently.
I would be in favor of allocating some portion of the budget, let's say 5%, to the COCOM so they could buy things for the warfighter. I think, to be clear, the services try earnestly to do this. To the extent they fail, I think it's a overdetermined, complex phenomena that in some cases can be traced back to the unintended consequences of Goldwater Nichols that were alluded to before. One creative way to experiment this that I tried and failed to do in Congress was to give the Pentagon the authority to use money that goes unspent at the end of the year, anywhere between $12 to $15 billion a year goes unspent. It goes into abeyance for 5 years, and then it evaporates back into the Treasury, where it's laundered for non-defense purposes. It would seem wise to me to provide flexible authority for the use of that money to make big bets on what the warfighters are saying they need right now. If that money, Congress would have to have the tolerance for some of that money to be spent unwisely, right? Tolerance for original mistakes. And the final thing I'd say, because I mentioned Congress and I used to be in it, I'd be remiss if I didn't, concede that ultimately the congressional budget dysfunction that you talked about, Chris, is upstream of almost all of this, right? Like, one obvious thing to me that we tried and failed to do was, why not align the fiscal year with the regular year? Like, there would be some transition process.
How about April 1, and then we'd be on schedule?
Might as well cancel daylight savings.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Put Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame.
And then you can start to do, I was long a proponent for combining, and there was actually a serious debate about this within our caucus at the beginning of the 117th Congress, combining the authorizing committees and the appropriations committees, because the separation just creates chaos. This goes all the way back to the days when John Quincy Adams was a member of Congress. We then recombined them, we separated them again, and every successful period of congressional budget reform has involved a reconsolidation of committee authority to better align with the executive branch oversight, committees that were, agencies that were charged with conducting oversight of. And so I would love to see an ambitious, I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal 2 months ago that nobody read, about how, Congress, imagine if we had an institution like the DOJ that was charged with overseeing the executive branch and making sure that it operates efficiently and giving it money. Oh, that's the United States Congress. Let's make congressional budgeting great again.
Well, I did read the op-ed because you emailed it to me. So
I'm constantly trying to get you to read my shit, Chris. Yeah.
it was pretty good.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
So you're running again for Congress. That's the okay.
Yeah.
So I think a point that Mike made is where I was going to go, which I think it's less about acquisition authority than it is having some walking around money.
Yeah.
It's basically a way to inject competition into the system, right? I think one of the things Goldwater Nichols did was very strictly bifurcate kind of the supply of military demand or military power from the demand for military power, and there's no free market mechanisms that kind of adjudicate this sanely in the Department of Defense. I don't think we want combatant commands, tooling up to run large programs and having program management offices. It's just not what they're good at doing, and it's just going to take them away from the thing we actually need them doing, which is planning for operations. I do think the resources, however, would enable them to get more of the requirements that they have now met. And I also think if those resources were there, it would allow for a lot of experimentation with different business models that are a long time in the making, a long time overdue. For example, capability as a service, right? I mean, this is something that a lot of people in this room do, but I don't think we're even scratching the surface at how far we could push different types of capabilities as a service, whether it's robots as a service. Frankly, I think if the combatant commands had the wherewithal to build JADC2 as a service, it would have been built and delivered to them a long time ago, and they'd be a lot happier and a lot more effective in their job. So there's a whole lot of world here, particularly with all of this commercial technology, more of these commercial business practices and systems that are kind of riding on underlying commercial technology. There's just a wild opportunity to get a bit creative with the business models and how we're acquiring capability, but I think that's more about the money and definitely would underscore the need for people to accept that there's going to be some risk in that and some things that don't really go according to plan, and I'd say that's a feature, not a bug.
Okay. Eric?
By the way, I just want to say something funny. Sure. Boeing tried that service model your days earlier in the tanker, but it was for a wrong reason it failed.
At a Reagan conference function several months ago, the context of this question, Chris, was asked, and I gave a football analogy of the system right now is very good going 80 yards and getting to the 20-yard line, but then the red zone and the valley of death kicks in, and it's very, very difficult and it's challenging. This is business. That's the rules of the game. I used, instead of the 5% at that time, I used to take 1% of the $1 trillion budget. 1%. And let's feel better is the enemy of good enough. Good enough and ready to field today will kick China's ass right now. So let's take that 1% and let's field Anduril stuff. Let's field Epirus's stuff. Let's field Kratos' stuff. Let's get it out there. Let's get it in the hands of the warfighter, taking into consideration everything Fatih said about interoperability. I got that better than anybody. And let's get some stuff fielded instead of studying the problem.
You can swear.
Okay.
Swearing's back. It's allowed again.
So that's kind of how I see that one.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask both Chris and Ryan a question. Picking up on that, you know, the investing in aerospace and defense over the decades, you know, goes through cycles, and we always talk about the successes that are here on the stage, but I was looking at some data recently. I mean, literally dozens and dozens of failed companies, just say in space launch and space satellites, right? So these were the darlings of Wall Street or the capital markets. I'm not going to name them all, but they're no longer around. So maybe for you two, given the size of your companies, you know, what needs to change or what needs to happen to make sure, you know, that the defense tech startups or new entrants or younger companies are successful, so we don't go back to where we were?
Yeah, good question. Look, I think Anduril and Shield have somehow, in many respects, overcome a system that was designed against new entrants. And, you know, I think the foundation, you know, I guess, you know, Chris can speak for himself on Anduril, but my perception is you guys are kicking ass. So, you know, Shield and Anduril, I think, are on relatively solid footing. But, you know, one of the things that's super inspiring for me and touches on the workforce challenges that were called out by my friends here on the right is there is an entire new generation of, you know, entrepreneur that wants to contribute to the mission of national security. We go back 10 years ago, and when we were going up and down Silicon Valley, we got told to pound sand by basically everybody. We were crazy. Why would you do that? Silicon Valley had turned its back on the defense sector, and 10 years today, and I think because of, you know, the great leadership of so many people across the industrial base and in policy positions that, you know, celebrate America, celebrate what America stands for, people want to sign up for the mission and contribute in a way that they can if it's building next generation technology. So I think that's awesome. And so I think your question is an excellent one. How do we make sure that, you know, these companies are stepping into a system where there is a shot at success that doesn't require threading a ridiculous, you know, needle in order to come out on the other side? And, you know, of course, I think part of that is, you know, it's a good test, right? Pressure creates stronger teams. But on the other hand, I think there's a certain unreasonableness to the way some of the things are bought today. I think one of the most fundamental challenges is the requirements process. And look, I think there's been a lot of positive conversation about moving to, look, I might not have a requirement, but I got a problem, right? And if we can get oriented on moving money to solve problems as opposed to moving money to fill requirements, and we can do that, you know, at a speed that I think is necessary for the country, I think that creates an environment where innovation can thrive, where disruptors can thrive. And so I think that's what it's going to take to help companies cross the valley of death.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess two comments to add to that. I think there's an enormous amount of low-hanging fruit that is right there that just needs to be fixed, that helps to create a level playing field, whether it's for VC-backed companies or frankly any company. And you know, the horror stories that we have are no different than the horror stories many in this room have. We've just had to live them recently where, you know, 6.5 years ago when I started at Anduril, I mean, business development at the Pentagon felt like breaking and entering. You know, we've built skiffs to spec that we're still waiting for SCI accreditation on. You know, we had to write proposals on typewriters and fly human beings to hand deliver them to program offices because we didn't have like AF7 where you could just like send an email. So we've had to do all of this kind of with one hand tied behind our back, and there's an enormous amount that could be done just to level the playing field and make it a bit more of a fair competition. But what I would say is sort of secondly, I think most of, you know, a lot of, you know, I don't know whether it's most, I don't know if it's a lot, but some number of these companies are not going to make it. And I think that's also something that we have to be prepared to happen, because that's what happens every day in a capitalist society. You know, most companies don't make it, but some have to win. Some have to get through, some have to sort of demonstrate that this is possible, so other companies can follow in their footsteps. But the government needs to not collectively freak out when a lot of venture-backed companies in the years to come, whether it's, you know, space or others, don't make it. That is actually a feature of successful capitalism, not a failure. I think the question will be, are they not making it for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons? And that is analysis that we're going to have to look, you know, kind of closely at. But, you know, the objective is not everybody wins and everybody gets a trophy. It'd be nice if the playing field was a bit more level, and then, you know, successful, you know, kind of be determined on the basis of merit.
All right, we're going to wrap up with two quick questions and under the umbrella of Doge. Mike referenced, I did write a Doge letter about 2 months ago, and just to explain what that was all about, I think the defense industrial base needs to speak up and be part of the solution. There's great current and former members of Congress, current and former members of the Pentagon and DOD, but the defense industrial base is part of the solution. And the purpose of my letter was to really start the dialogue. I have no doubt there's a heck of a lot better suggestions or advice than what I wrote, but it was really to get the dialogue started. So I continue to encourage everybody in the industry to speak up, throw some ideas out there. So the first question will go on a scale of 1 to 10 under Doge, you know, fixing the DOD process to make it more efficient, more balanced, whatever we want to talk about. 1, you know, maybe adding another cost accounting standard and a few more words in a FAR. 10 would be like blowing it up and starting from scratch. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think we need to do? We'll just go right down here.
10.
I would say 6, more than half, because I mean, there are a lot of good systems that work. Even if you look at far edges
6
today,
was the answer.
yeah, one person can make all the decisions they want, but they're not making it. So there needs to be a major change.
8.
I actually think we have all of the authority we need to do whatever we want. I think that's actually not the problem, so I'd give it a 1. But on the Doging side, I think there are enormous parts of the defense establishment that could be kind of doged in place, and we'd be better off for it.
Doged in
Doge
place.
in place, that's good.
Remote Doge, I guess. All right, Eric, we're kind of averaging like a 6 right now, I think.
6.
Okay. All right. And then the final provocative question will be under the Doge umbrella, which I think a lot of people, rightfully so, think of the civilian workforce, rules, regulations, but you know, there could be a part of Doge that deals with the actual weapon system, so we'll go the reverse order here. Will there be a large program, which I'll define as $1 billion or more, terminated or truncated as a part of the Doge process by the end of calendar 25?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there should be more than 1.
More than 1. 6?
6, yeah.
6. Yes. Okay. Well, I'll turn it back to Jim, but gentlemen, thank you for participating. Thanks for your answers. Well done. Back to you, Jim. Is it happy hour or?
Sir, to be honest, sir, I didn't think we'd get this far.
What do you mean? We're done. Okay, go.
There we go. It's a wrap.
All right, thank you.